What's going on, everybody? It's another edition of the Countdown to the Geekcast. My name is Ted, aka Steady, and joining me once again, David Lozano from the Star Wars Stuff podcast.
Happy Tano Tuesday, everybody.
Hey, I like that. Tano Tuesday. It's almost like Taco Tuesday,
But the
but
space
Tano Tuesday.
version?
Exactly. We got a great show for you guys. Everybody's been talking and chatting about the Ahsoka series. This is going to be our first time talking about the premiere. So if you haven't seen it, I don't know why. It's been a week, but we've been waiting and we've been like watching it and watching everybody else talk about it and stuff. And we've been busy with events and editing previous interviews and things. Now we can finally sit down and talk about it. We want to hear from you guys. So throw your theories, your comments, your complaints, if there's any, all about the Ahsoka series. This is a safe space, a safe Star Wars space. So please drop your thoughts in the comments. And before we get to do that, I always want to make sure we give a shout out to our sponsor, the fantastic and the great Real Retro Store. And we're back. It's not as cool as yours, Lozano, I know.
Yeah,
Oh,
a few of
man.
them.
A few is like a gross misunderstatement, I'm sure. Gross understatement. Listen, if you've seen our show before, we do TV series a little different. We start off with a brief summary about the episodes. We'll start off with episode 1, then we'll go into episode 2 after that. But first, I want to ask Dave, general overview before we get into any spoiler territory. General thoughts about the premiere, both 1 and 2. Does it feel very Star Wars to you? Does it feel maybe a little bit like Disney Star Wars to you? Are they getting you back to what made Star Wars great to begin with? What are your thoughts, sir?
To me, it definitely does feel like it's a dream show for any Rebels fan out there, especially the Super Rebels fans out there. Feels like a continuation of that. Seeing Chopper in live action was just ridiculously fantastic to see in live action. It looks like he's almost animated in a way, but it's live action. So it's just kind of one of those things that we don't have the same type of situation where we had the voice actor come into real life and do the live action, kind of like akin to a Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff type situation. But we do have Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as General Hera Syndulla, and Natasha Liu Bordizzo as Sabine. And I feel like it's got Dave Filoni's signature, his first ever kind of live action signature. When I first saw it, it felt a little slow and plotting, but I think there's a reason behind that, and I think
I
there's
agree.
going to be a big build up. And I don't think it's traditional Star Wars per se, but it definitely is an interesting watch for people that aren't really kind of fluent in Ahsoka's story with Clone Wars, with Rebels, because all those people, it seems like, that didn't watch the animation have a ton of questions now, and they want to know certain things, so they're coming back to the people that did watch those shows and have all these questions. So I think that is a good sign.
I agree. I feel like what you just said about it is starting off a little slow, but on one hand, and I hope that I'm not going to get burned by Disney or Lucasfilm when I say this. On one hand, they have to get us caught up with these characters. It's been years, maybe a decade or so since the events, the final episode of Rebels. Do you know exactly how long it's been since then? Have they talked about it? What's your best guess?
Well, I know the show, man, I want to say it started before 2015, The Force Awakens. So it was 4 seasons long. So it's been a good while. It's been a few years, but of course we've had Ahsoka come back into the Mandalorian live action. We've seen Chopper roll across the screen in Rogue One very briefly, and we've heard the intercom say, "General Syndulla, you're wanted at this post" in Rogue
Yeah.
One. And we saw the ghost in the final battle over Scarif in Rogue One, and we
Yeah,
also saw the ghost, perhaps maybe the ghost at the end of Rise of Skywalker in Episode 9 in that final big battle. So there's been hints, and people have wondered where was Ahsoka during all this time, and I think we got a huge clue in these first two episodes why she really wasn't present.
cool. Um, so I think that number one, they have to get us caught up on these characters. They have to sort of drop us into this universe, and figure out, what they've been up to, what's been going on. And I think that you have to start us off kind of slow, and really catch us up on everyone's motivations. Not everybody's motivated to do anything, as we kind of meet Sabine in a very dark and dreary place, and we still see that she's, still reeling after, um, I would say, losing Ezra, but it was by choice, and she knows that. But she still hasn't come to terms with it, and so, like, we clearly see Ahsoka has her own beef, not beef, but Ahsoka has her own doubts about Sabine. So I just feel like we have to start off in a, a, a very honest place with these characters at the beginning of the series. And I think, and I hope, I hope, but this is Disney Star Wars, so they don't always deliver when you want them to, that it does pick up the pace and we sort of get into a more Rebels type feel. Let's get on with the episode. Episode 1, Master and Apprentice, written and directed by Dave Filoni. The biggest difference about this series, instead of all the others, a crawl. I was like, dude, this is amazing. All right, already starting off on a good foot. Is this the first crawl for any series? I mean, not.
We got kind of a crawl for Solo in the classic like light blue.
Solo was a movie, right?
Yeah, right. Like the long time ago, far, far away color
But this is
crawl.
the first like Disney series with a crawl.
I think so.
I think it
I
is.
can't think back to any of the series at the beginning now. We all wanted a crawl in Rogue One. We didn't get one,
No, we
and
did not.
Kathleen Kennedy came back and said we should have added that.
My
And then I
bad. My
think
bad.
they've announced going forward there's going to be crawls in front of films, which every single like piece of media beforehand had a crawl. Video games, comics. I mean, it's like why take it away? It didn't make sense.
Let's get into the summary. Starts off like this: some badass known as Balin Skull arrives on a Republic ship disguised as a Jedi in order to retrieve a prisoner, Morgan Elsbeth, who is an ally of Admiral Thrawn. Next, we see Ahsoka, who has found an ancient temple and is unlocking a mechanism which reveals a MacGuffin. I mean, a sphere, which we believe is a map leading to Thrawn. She is confronted by some self-destructing assassin droids that but she makes quick work of them, while a handful go into self-destruct mode and decimate the area. Ahsoka's ship goes by the codename Fulcrum, which is a name we're very familiar with, which is a codename for the Imperial officer who defected from the Empire in the Rebel series. Enter Sabine, who has a little trouble with authority and plays a final recording from Ezra, which we haven't seen before. Let's see. Turns out the temple on Arcana, where Ahsoka got the map from, was built by the Night Sisters of Dothamir, which was from the Clone Wars series, I believe. Is that right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maul's mother was a Night Sister, and that's where the Night Sisters, Night Witches were
So
on Dathomir.
the temple is built by the Night Sisters of Dothamir, which Morgan Elsbeth is a descendant. Finally, Ahsoka goes to Sabine for help with the map, but Sabine has other ideas and takes off with it. She ends up being successful, but then is attacked by Shin Hati. I'm going to go with Hati,
Yeah,
and
Shinhati.
is impaled before Ahsoka can intervene, and that's where we end episode 1. Um, so we meet a few badasses already. Ahsoka looks great in prime form. She did that little like cut hole in the ground thingy. I actually put that was first made famous by Celine in the Underworld movies. But I don't want to say it's the first time it for sure that it's happened. But your thoughts on episode one. What'd you think about it?
Fantastic opening. Love the crawl, like you stated. The introduction of Balin Skull and Shin Hati coming on board. It was like the inverse of the Phantom Menace when Qui Gon and Obi Wan approached that one ship. But of course,
Mm.
these guys aren't on the light side. They lean more towards the dark, even though they don't have solid red sabers. They have the orange sabers, and just to see those new characters land the way they did, they're already fan favorites, and it's just so heartbreaking now to know that Ray Stevenson will never reprise his character. Um, but yeah, the action was awesome. Seeing the all white interior of that New Republic ship, um, it harkened back to the Tantive 4, of course, the very first images that we got of the original Star Wars in 1977, and just the way that Ray Stevenson portrayed that character, you could kind of tell there was something, there was a bit of light that was shining through more so than a lot of these dark side characters that do end up turning in the end, which made it for a new unique perspective, I think, in seeing a dark side user. And yeah, just that beginning was so cool. I love the way it started, and it got me really hyped up.
I think it's fantastic. I love all the Easter eggs. You see a helmet that Sabine used frequently on her missions whenever she was going undercover on Rebels, and then under this like work table that she has, you see her armor. You see her Mandalorian helmet. And the only question I have is, we really haven't seen her train with Ahsoka, right? Like this is all
Right, it was
stuff that we're
alluded
just
to. So yeah, Star Wars does a thing where they kind of drop you in a period in time, and there's this story and this big gap that we don't get to see until maybe creators revisit it later on. I'm not sure if we're ever going to get that. Maybe we'll get that. Maybe if Ahsoka's successful, maybe they'll go back and reshoot that stuff, or maybe we're going to get flashbacks during the season and see that stuff. We don't know yet. Still at episode 2, but yeah, Sabine, Natasha Liu, Bordizzo knocked out of the park. I thought that was quintessential Sabine live action. All the artwork, all the graffiti, her helmet that
yeah.
she wore on that long strip of highway on Lethal that there's never any traffic somehow, some way.
Well,
And it's like,
there was a celebration. It's probably mandatory
but
that
it
you
was
must.
always in the animated series where there's like nothing on the highway. And it's like that we've never seen anyone on there
It just
except
goes
like the
nowhere.
heroes. We'll go straight to her house. That tower that Ezra used to live in, that Sabine kind of overtook
Yeah.
there. But yeah, we see all the trophies from all the buckets she collected from stormtroopers and scout troopers. Um, yeah, it's incredible to see in live action. I'm so happy for all the Rebel super fans that they have this and they're enjoying it. And the Kiner brothers are doing the music, so there's that
So
connective
good.
tissue. Yeah, yeah, between the animated show and the live action. So you have those guys working, and Kevin Kiner, he's done more Star Wars music than any composer, even more than John Williams. So
Yeah, the music is so fantastic on this show. Even sort of the opening credits when you get all the Star Wars masks and all the helmets and stuff. I'm like, ooh,
yeah.
this is new, and it's enticing. It really is.
And did you
Um,
catch that it was all red?
I did not.
So that's a deviation from previous
It
shows. It's
is.
been
It
red and
is.
blue. And then the
Wow.
Lucasfilm logo's red, and then the crawl was red. What's the deal with all this red? What does it mean?
What does it mean?
It would make more sense if it
Hmm.
was orange
Hmm.
because it would match the sabers of Balin and Shin. But I don't know. If you remember back to Clone Wars season 7 that Disney released a few years back, the
Yeah,
final season of Clone Wars, they had red font as well.
that's interesting. I wonder if it's just trying to tell us that there's this hidden, you know,
There's a Phantom Menace.
I don't want to say that, but we learn in the next episode, and I'll get to that in a second, that there is this sort of undercover faction of the Empire that is still organized and working to. They have their own mission, and we're learning about that. We learned about that in the Mandalorian, that they're actually actively looking for Admiral Thrawn. That was the very last thing we saw, right, in the last season of the Mandalorian. So these are all sort of tying together, and maybe the red is just to signify that the Empire or some part of the Empire is growing, and it's working within the shadows, and it's all of these things that have happened sort of in the prequels, that evil is scheming again, and we're always just too late. We find out that we're using the same bad guys. All these people, and this is not something new, right? Because I think they touched on this in another series, that anyone that was working for the Empire, just like your run of the mill factory worker or whatever else, like they're still using those people. Those people still kept their jobs. They basically just had new management,
Right.
and that works for, like, you're changing your cantina manager to a new manager. But these are people who were making weapons of planetary destruction, and were actively trying to, like, wipe out
Right.
and you know put this blanket of fascism across the galaxy.
Right.
You just
It
can't use the same people, folks.
Well, I mean, it mirrors what the U.S. government did after World War II. I mean, they brought over a bunch of scientists that were
Hey, you're
Nazis
right.
over, and they worked on, I think, Operation Paperclip. I think.
Isn't also a little bit like the Civil War as well? Because the Civil War, we all know that the North won, but they still kept, like, a lot
Yeah.
of Southerners in high-ranking places, and people say the North really never recovered from that war, and it's almost like it was a we can tell later on. But we have a whole nother episode, and I know that we're running out of time. So, part two, Toil and Trouble. Balin Skull reaches Cetos and says they have located the reflex point. He looks to the sky as we hear the faint noises of Purgle. There was also a moment in the first episode where we were in Sabine's room, and I also think that we also heard faint noises of Purgle. And no, it wasn't meant to be heard by the characters. It seemed more like background music, but I was just like, that just sounds like Purgle. Why would they throw it in there sort of randomly? But I digress. Sabine is able to assist in the search for Morgan Elsbeth's operations after Ahsoka dismantles a droid, and when Syndulla and Ahsoka investigate the operations, they uncover a secret Empire cell that's been working covertly to build a ship that could traverse across the galaxy. I didn't write the rest of this part, so I'll just wing it. Um, they figure out that an assassin droid is leaving on a ship with a massive light speed engine, and when Ahsoka goes in pursuit, she's confronted by Merrick, which I swear I've heard that name before, but
Yes, you
when
have in
okay,
several places.
tell me in a second. Tell me in a second.
Okay.
They pretty much battle until they kind of reach a stalemate. He escapes, and then Syndulla is able to put a tracking device on the ship that was escaping the planet, and that's sort of where we finish that episode. So Merrick, I know I've heard that name. Where's it from?
Most recently, that was the pet of the bounty hunter Imbo in Clone Wars. Also, Merrick is from Norse legend, which was also a wolf, just like Balin was a wolf and Shin was a wolf. They were the two wolves. One chased the sun and the other chased the moon. And once they devoured those planetoids, um, Ragnarok would start.
And if spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the Rebels series, but the wolves were definitely important towards the end of the show, because we did lose Ezra's master, and I should know that. What's his name?
Kanan Jarrus?
Yes, Kanan. Once we lost Kanan, there was a wolf that sort of took on his essence or spirit
Yes.
from that point forward. So I wonder if there's any correlation, if there's sort of.
Well, with Filoni, he loves wolves and he incorporate wolves into everything. And even the world between worlds, you see wolves running around in a circle. Um, and
Yes.
he wears a wolf pin on his cowboy hat. And he's named a trooper in Clone Wars, Wolf, Commander Wolf, I believe. Um, and yeah, the Loth wolves in Star Wars Rebels, huge, huge wolves. And you're right. Once Kanan did pass away, it seems like his essence was transferred. A lot like how um, the sister in the Mortis arc, when she died, her essence passed into Morai, which is
That's right.
essentially Ahsoka's owl that she has that we haven't seen yet. So that's a big question. Where was Morai? But we think we saw it in the episode The Jedi in The Mandalorian season 2. If you
Mm.
look really closely in a couple of the frames, up at the top you see what looks to be an owl, but we haven't seen Morai yet, and we're kind of wondering where is the owl at because she's usually around.
Derpy Entertainment is in the chat saying this was a great 2 episode premiere, but in the time period, anything can happen. So it's interesting how this will connect with the Mandoverse into the sequels after the rumored Filoni movie. Not rumored, right? Filoni's movie is definitely a go. I
Yes,
think what's more rumored is this secret Disney Plus Star Wars series that they've codenamed. What was it? The Lost Track.
Ghost Track 17.
Ghost Track 17. I think that's more
Yeah,
rumored because we haven't heard anything about that. But Filoni movie should definitely be a go. And forgive me, the chat's not working as it's supposed to. It's supposed to sort of not cover our profiles so much, but for whatever reason it is. Brett's in the chat says, "Is the Inquisitor Assassin Sith with the double-bladed saber Galen Merrick, aka Starkiller?" I'm gonna take this theory first, and then I'm gonna let you take it. My absolute 100% best guess is no, because
you're taking the
that's
field.
that's opening a can of worms. I think they're using the Starkiller. I think they're using the Starkiller actor so that like they do with a lot of people in sort of the extended Star Wars universe. They sort of throw people a bone every now and then. Hey, we can't use your character Daniel Logan, but you can help us by being this extra or voicing this person or however much. I'm gonna go with that until they prove me wrong. And if they do prove me wrong, I'm actually be extremely happy that they're gonna tie into the video games. However, I'm being very serious that you're getting into a whole lot of like mixed bag stuff, and I feel like it's way too complicated and complex to sort of write this into fruition. Is it possible? I'll say yes. I'm leaning towards no. David, you take it now.
I have a lot to say on this, and I agree with your viewpoint, Ted, but I think you don't know a certain piece of information that's been out there. So it does
Hooks, hooks.
sound something that Filoni has said in the
Ah,
past.
all right.
So, which I mean, anyone can miss. He has stated that he wanted to take the character of Starkiller. I don't know if it was exactly what it was in the video games Force Unleashed or just a different interpretation, but he wanted to use Starkiller as the Grand Inquisitor role, what that became in Rebels.
Mm,
So that like idea was out there then. He might have taken that idea and recycled it into what Merrick is now. I could see that happening, not so much the Force Unleashed Galen Merrick, which was Darth Vader's apprentice from the video games. So
yeah.
that to me is more of a possibility than I think that's Ezra as Merrick, that new Inquisitor, because we have no idea who this character really is under the mask. Um,
Okay. Wait. So you're thinking this is Ezra? Is that what you just said?
I well, that's another popular theory that is basically Ezra, who's been like maybe mind flayed, because I mean they're in communication with Thrawn, and we have no idea where Ezra is really. If he did come back somehow, I mean we just don't. We know so little of what is really going on here, and there's potential for so many different twists and different ways to go in the story. I don't think that Filoni would do that, but have it so on the nose that yeah, that's Ezra the Inquisitor. I mean, that would be very, very like I don't know, old school, like 20th century storytelling, really.
Yeah.
And we would all see that coming, and that's all something I think people kind of assume. Another possibility is maybe it could be Kanan brought through World Between Worlds. That would be tough to kind of explain and digest for the audiences, I think. But I mean, you think you cover the face. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, who is
Right.
under there? And it's like, there are only so many Inquisitors that it's like we've ran through most of them. We've seen them all through the comics and the shows. And it's like, who is this new person that all of a sudden has appeared? So that's the kind of interesting thing. I think
Yeah.
Filoni has crafted it expertly to make us like really kind of wonder who it is.
It's it's Sam Jackson. It's Mace Windu.
Sam Jackson.
LeBron Feds in the chat says, "Hello, everybody. Can't stay cooking dinner, but just want to say hi, and I love the Ahsoka." He also says, "Don't forget to give the like button a snuggle." Yeah, yes, of course. If you're watching this now, if you love the show, if you've watched our stuff in the past, if it's your first time watching us, do us a favor, click the like button because it always helps, and it takes a half a second. Do that. Listen, I love Filoni and I love his writing and I love his passion for the franchise. I feel like all the obvious choices won't be good enough. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
Filoni will go for the thing we least expect and he will make sure that it still has the same level of impact as we hope.
Right. Right.
That's my thought. But like I said, I always
Yeah,
haven't been
and if
right
you
about
look close at
this.
the helmet too, it has those same lines down the face, like
Yeah.
a like the Grand Inquisitor's alien race.
Real quick, I'm gonna get to your comment, Derpy. But for anybody who doesn't know exactly where Ezra was when we last saw him, he sort of reached this pinnacle of like force wielding. He became not one with the force, but he became pretty powerful as much as you can. And so he summoned these force sensitive space whales. Yes, I said space whales, and he basically captured Thrawn, overthrew the empire on his home planet of Lothal, and he left. He went into hyperspace, and he had a half dozen or so of these space whales leading the way, and had Thrawn in their grasp, and there was no escape. And we have no idea where he went, but it's been decades or a little bit less than that, and none of these characters have seen him. But it was meant almost like I'll be back, but I really have to do this, and I know that all my friends are going to not understand what sacrifice I'm making. So that's kind of where we last saw him, and so how Thrawn got out of the clutches of space whales and prime Ezra, I have no idea. But yeah, back to the chat. Derpy says, I just hope they don't bait Thrawn, and so far, so good, but I know Disney, they'll save him for season two. I could see that. And people have also asked me if I think we'll see Ezra in this season. I also do not think we'll see Ezra till the end of season one. And I'm okay with that. We have enough rebels characters to keep us happy, and I don't want to go too far too soon. And listen, this is also a very Luke Skywalker scenario, which hey, we haven't seen you in a long time. What have you been doing? It better be good, and the answer better not be I've been alone drinking this blue milk. That's all I'm got to say about that. Brett says, I also loved the HK Eye of Sion star map references from KOTOR. Ah, Brett, you genius, you. Yes, the HK assassin droids are from the Knights of the Old Republic. Eye of Sion, I actually don't recall that as much. And Dave, I have a question for you. Even the end credits look like the world between worlds, which was this I don't know what you want to call it or how you describe it, but what I describe it is this dimension that either created by the Force or it's used by light users of the Force, any users of the Force.
Right.
And we last saw this when Ezra entered this sort of pocket dimension, and it's what the end credits sort of look like. It's what the map almost looked like, and
Yeah, I would say
so
more the map than World Between Worlds. because the star map that did come up, and it pointed to a different galaxy with like the Purgles encircling, a lot like the Loth Wolves did
Yeah,
in the animation for World Between Worlds. So that's what I think it looks like more so. And a fan took all the pieces of the map and put them on like one image, and I don't really think it tells us much, but it really shows that they put thought behind it, and
sure.
it's probably an actual map that actually does lead you to the fictitious place that I think we're about to go with that Super Star Destroyer hyperdrive that Morgan Elsbeth now has with the hyperdrive loop ring that we see at the end.
Derpy says 2 hours until episode 3, and it's going to be a short one apparently, so I hope it doesn't fall off. Rumored to be around 35 minutes, and I'm not sure if that includes the credit. If it does, let's give it 30 to be conservative. Brett also says the other theory is that he is Ezra. Yes, definitely. That is a theory, and I don't think Filoni, even as great as he is, has a good enough reason to explain to us why that might be Ezra. You really have to give us a solid reason because Ezra was like maybe the most powerful Jedi alive at the time when, he left the planet of Lothal with Thrawn. Arguably the most powerful at the time. Arguably. Legacy Nerds in the chat says, well, the original Star Killer is long dead. Yeah, but clones.
Well, I mean, live action supersedes all other media, so the
Like you
story could
said.
change.
Yeah. He says, so it could definitely be a clone of Star Killer, yeah, as I just mentioned. There are a crap load of those walking around. Caitlin Myers in the chat saying, cringe. Must be talking about the Ahsoka show. Legacy Nerd says, that would hurt if it's Kanan, would break my heart after his sacrifice. Um, Although I would want to see Kanan above all else. I'd want to see Kanan more than Ezra. I'd want to see Kanan more than Mace Windu. Yeah, because I want to give Freddie Prince Jr. his own shot. You know what I mean?
And Freddie Prinze has like profusely stated he's not involved with Star Wars at all. He says he's not involved. He'll never be involved. He's done. He's done his time. He said.
That's bizarre. Let's see here.
But I mean,
Derpy
he could be
says
lying.
I think we'll get an Old Republic trilogy sooner than later because the device they are building to get to Thrawn apparently is a reference to a villain from that era. Ooh. It's just a theory though in the Eye of Sion, so take it with a grain of salt. Darth. Darth Sion. Kirby says, Brett, I guess that theory is true then. Zion's right eye was a round, glowing circle. Yeah. Your thoughts on that? The KOTOR references. Darth Sion.
I'm really not familiar with that in KOTOR. But I think what these first two episodes, I think a lot of people are I don't want to say missing the point, but I mean jumping from one galaxy to another galaxy, that's something that we've never seen in live action
Right.
that presents so many new story possibilities. And I think we are going to jump to the next galaxy, and I think that's the answer in and of itself why Ahsoka and crew weren't seen in the sequels, and the other parts of live action during the timeline that Ahsoka takes place, and that's the explanation of where they were at. They're gonna go to this spot where these Night Sisters are, and this galaxy might not even have any type of Force users. It might all be the Night Witches. That might be the only Force power that galaxy or system group of worlds know. So Ahsoka might be the founder of the new Jedi Order in that galaxy in this part of Star Wars. So the possibilities for creative storytelling here are just incredible. And the
Pa-
possibilities, man.
Pathway to Peridia. Where have we heard that before?
Other than the Ahsoka show, it does sound familiar. I haven't done research on that.
Let's see. This here says we find a precedent for this theory in the Clone Wars season 6, episode 12, Destiny. which is a lead to the location of the cosmic force that feeds the living force across the galaxies. Peridia might be a branch of the living force. Interesting. I've always been of the mindset that we need to get more to the core of the force. We got there in Clone Wars. We got there back in Rebels, where the Jedi Temple that Ezra went into the world between worlds, showed us the father, son, and daughter of the Force, and I was like, cool. They're like bringing things together, but in live action, we don't get a lot of those references, and so I feel like we need to get back to the lore of the Force and the lore of the Jedi. And if we're making KOTOR references, we can go and explore other galaxies where the original Sith came from. Those were like the top of the food chain guys over there. So I feel like you mentioned, the possibilities are endless. We're a few hours away from episode 3. It is short, but hopefully that doesn't mean that it's going to be a lull or a lag of any kind. I'm just hoping that this series, and so far I feel like we're headed that way, will help us learn more about the Force in live action. We're not just going to learn about it in video games. We're not just going to learn about it in the animated shows that we've been watching, but learn more about the Force, its origins, all that good stuff. And Ahsoka is the best person to help us sort of explore these new realms and get us something that we're all going to be learning together about. That would be fantastic. I really hope so.
Yeah, it really
Uh,
feels like it'll be a new era in Star Wars.
Dave, final thoughts on the premiere and what you hope for episode 3.
I thought it was a solid kind of beginning, I guess, to the show. Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, it was kind of a slow build. The dialogue was slow and kind of plotting, but I think it was necessary in a way because I believe in Filoni and his storytelling, and this is his first ever show that he is really running, and he came up with the whole story. He wrote every episode. He directed 2 episodes, episode 1 and episode 5, and everyone's predicting that episode 5 something big is going to happen. World Between Worlds stuff, maybe Anakin stuff, but Steph Green directed the second episode, and she's directing tonight's episode. So I thought it was a good start, and just seeing Rebels in live action, essentially. I mean, seeing Chopper, like I talked about earlier, seeing Lethal, seeing Sabine, seeing the actual epilogue in live action from Rebels when Ahsoka the White shows up. But she didn't show up in the white robe with the staff in live action. They took that out. But
Yeah.
I think there's a reason for that, and I think we'll find that out. And don't sleep on the Lord of the Rings references in here because Filoni does treat Ahsoka like Gandalf, and we all know at the end, I guess spoilers for what 100-year-old book, almost 100-year-old book. But when Gandalf, when his time ends, he goes off to the Grey Havens, which is a long ways away. Could this new galaxy that we saw in episode 2 be the Grey Havens for Ahsoka, where she goes and stays and never comes back? Possibly. That would make a lot of sense. So I think it's exciting. It's gonna build. It's gonna get more faster and intense, which was George Lucas's philosophy in Star Wars and the original trilogy. And Filoni studied under George Lucas for many years. Lucas considers him very close. Considers him like his adoptive son, and Filoni has Lucas's number on speed dial. So anytime he gets stuck in a story point or wonders what George would do, he can just give him a call.
An apprentice of George Lucas, if you will.
Yeah.
Derpy says, I think we get Anakin stuff tonight as a prediction. I love that prediction. The only other reference that was interesting to me is that Ahsoka's ship was either codenamed T6 1974. And I thought, like, okay, that must be a reference, which would be interesting because the original movie came out in 78,
7.
77.
Right.
I looked it up.
It's
Star
Filoni's
Wars
birthday.
1974's birthday.
Yeah.
And also, Star Wars Rough Draft was written as a full rough draft by George Lucas in May of 1974. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. All right, folks. We're a few hours away from the next episode. Can't wait. Appreciate your thoughts. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you want to talk more Star Wars, Dave Lozano here. You can join him on the Star Wars Stuff podcast on YouTube shortly. Have a good night, folks. May the force be with you. Peace.
Always.